Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. We are so excited about this panel. We had a prep call last week, and I think it could have lasted all afternoon based on all of the insights that these folks have from building companies, working within sustainability practices of large companies. So we'll get kicked off right away just by going through each of your backgrounds. You're all committing your careers to fighting climate change by building businesses, which is a unique way to go about fighting this issue. So let's kick off with just how you got there. Tell us about your journey, where you started, and then how that led you to what you're doing today.
All right. Thank you guys for being here. My career started very early on because I grew up in a family business. So Sorrelli Jewelry is the business that my parents started back in '83. So literally the barn next to my house growing up was their studio where they manufactured everything. So directly out of undergrad, I started working for them. I became the sales and marketing director. After a short time, spent some time in our production facility in Shanghai. And all the while was thinking about our climate crisis and my kind of desire to be an environmental activist. But I was like, how do I deal with this reconciliation of knowing a fashion business kind of through and through, but wanting to impact this totally other part of the world. So I left Sorrelli to pursue an MBA, went to Columbia, ended up joining a consulting practice and becoming a consultant for big Fortune 500 retail companies, and then kind of segued into advising those same retail clients on sustainability strategy. So that was really interesting, and I got to use all the background that I had in supply chain and production and product development, but from an environmental and human rights perspective. And then I had an opportunity to join PVH, the corporate responsibility team there. So they're the company that owns Tommy Hilfiger, Calvin Klein. It's a $14 billion large retail company. And that was amazing. I got an in-house view of what CR means to that type of typical kind of retail company. And then just recently, I had the opportunity to rejoin Sorrelli as the CEO. So I did that in January, and it's really exciting kind of using all the background that I've had from consulting and from my in-house sustainability experience to apply that to a smaller business that is very intimate for me.
I will point out that my earrings tonight are Sorrelli Jewelry made. Appreciate that.
I hooked up my fellow panelists.
So hi everyone, my name is Chole. I grew up in France, moved to New York 14 years ago. Having parents that were entrepreneurs, they pushed me to have a steady job and a steady income. So that's what I did in finance for 10 years. But when I finally got my green card, my dream that was to open a restaurant, finally I realized that was the good timing. So I went to culinary school, did a management degree as well, had the chance to work at 11 Madison Park for a few months. And then having all of this under my belt, I opened my restaurant 3 years ago. So that was very exciting. The parallel to that, which was, loving food and preparing food for more people and having access to healthy and clean and local ingredients, I didn't realize that growing up in France meant that I was an environmentalist. I just thought that all the things we were doing on a daily basis were natural. And then when I moved to New York and I realized the amount of waste and to-go and the lights being on all the time and all those things started to really bother me. I didn't know how I could address that, but I know that this was something that was in the back of my mind. And when I had the chance to open my cafe, I wanted it to be the most sustainable cafe in New York City. So that's what I did for the past 3 years. And our mission, as Danielle was saying, was to serve to-go food in reusable glass jars. So that was the whole idea, educating people about bringing their jars back or bringing their cup back for coffee and giving them a discount. And having worked on that, I started now a new adventure, which is the same concept, fresh food in glass jars, but in vending machines. So instead of having one location just impacting one community in the West Village, we now are launching vending machine, and we're hoping to have some all around the city and soon all around the country, so that we can educate more and more people on how to eat well, but also do something good for the environment.
Hi everyone, I'm Robyn. Beginning into sustainability and new energy strategy was in my engineering degree. I was studying civil engineering out in Stanford, and you're learning about how to design buildings so they don't fall down, and just basic, straightforward structural engineering stuff. But at the time, I was reading books that were not assigned to me; they were just out. It was a lot of an exciting time for books like Cradle to Cradle or Natural Capitalism. I'm really thinking about holistic design thinking, and it was really different from what I was learning about how to design buildings, and that frustrated me, but was also provocative. So when I graduated, I went into energy efficiency consulting out in California, which back then was kind of like the only state that had that job. Now it's everywhere, which is great. But I learned a lot, and then I actually went over to Google, where I was an assistant to the two co-founders. I describe it as like Devil Wears Prada for nerds. We did a lot of weird stuff, and there's a lot of high pressure situations involving planes and things, but it was also really amazing. And one of my key subject areas for them was being owner's rep as they were building out their offices around the world. It was around the time they were going public and scaling. They cared about the culture. So I was used to architecture firms and construction firms from my college internships, and so I was representing them in their voice, and I would sneak in a lot of green building features, and they loved that and wanted more. And so I went and founded Google's green operations team. So I went and greened Google for the next few years, put solar all over the headquarters. And this was when there weren't enough solar panels in the world to do a 1 megawatt project. I mean, it was really annoying and early, but now all these things are easy and abundant. And worked with product teams and data center energy procurement, all this stuff, all of these things that impact sustainability, and it was a great training ground for me. And then since I've just been hooked by the energy bug, I've worked in the wind industry. I've helped commercialize more distributed generation and some water stuff, and worked at a large power company, helping them shift away from coal plants towards clean energy microgrids. So I've sort of dabbled all around and learned a ton, and Blueprint. And then real quickly, right before I launched my new company, I actually went into the real estate industry, where a lot of real estate companies were starting to realize that their buildings were important facets of the new energy grid, and I didn't need to tell them that. I was working at the largest home builder. They had already started their own solar company. They were starting to explore how to, further venture into this world. And, that's really where all the pieces came together in terms of how energy and real estate and technology can come together to create an exciting, powerful platform that can improve greenhouse gas performance and attract more capital, and just get that cycle going to transform our current infrastructure into something that is not something that scares us and makes us worried. It's producing really big benefit that pushes us into the future in a happy, positive way.
So I think one thing that's interesting is just seeing this over a long period of time. This isn't, you woke up yesterday and you were like, oh, today I'm committed to climate change, and today I want to start a business related to this. This is something that has been part of your DNA and kind of what's been important to you, or values for all of you. And in kind of your career evolution, it manifested in different ways. So for others in the room, sustainability might be more of a new concept and a buzzword that's really become even more proliferated in finance in particular in the past couple of years. So how is this manifesting in your businesses? So whether it's you're selling to consumers or businesses, what do you feel after observing it from the very early days to now? What's changed, and how does that affect how you're building your companies? And that's a question for all of you. So Lily, we'll start with you, just because we were talking about this idea of making it a more circular type of experience shopping with your company. So how has the macro landscape affected that prioritization within your company?
Yeah, so I think in retail, sustainability and the idea of sustainability is very different today than it was 10 years ago, and 100% different than it was 20 years ago. I think, a couple decades ago, 10 years, 20 years, it was if you were thinking about apparel or fashion from a sustainable lens, you were pretty much thinking about Patagonia and maybe Eileen Fisher, and it was a little bit of a crunchy granola vibe, and that was kind of it. And now you have like mass retailers like Ann Taylor, Free People, Urban Outfitters adopting literally rental businesses as part of their core, because they're seeing that, and this is abundant in consumer research today, but you're seeing that consumers increasingly want sustainability and are aware of what that means. So truly wanting transparency in their supply chain, wanting to know what the kind of human rights ethical standard is for their clothing, what the environmental standards are. And then not only that, but actually thinking through, if I'm buying a piece of clothing, what is the end of life? So am I buying it for 5 uses and it's going in the garbage? And what does that mean to me as a consumer? Am I buying like fewer, better things, the kind of Quiana Everlane vibe? Or am I just skipping buying something and owning it all together and, you know, renting my wardrobe, doing a rent the runway, or doing kind of one of these, like Ann Taylor has done and Free People has done, introducing rental to the business. So very, very different landscape in fashion and retail.
Yeah, I think food is an obvious one because of food waste. Everybody knows about it. Everybody can see it on a daily basis. And I feel that in the past 10 years, the whole buy local, eat your local food is something that everybody has heard of and is trying to be careful of, but doesn't necessarily push it to the same level. I think that within the past few years, we've seen a huge change. Clearly last summer with the whole plastic straw, and everybody has seen the picture of the poor tortoise with the straw in its nose, has completely changed the landscape. I can tell you that as a restaurant owner, it was impossible to buy paper straw because they were out of stock around the world. So that is very positive because people are shifting in the right direction. That being said, in the restaurant industry, especially in the to-go industry that I'm in, there's a lot of greenwashing and a lot of people are lying on what they're doing, or just they pretend to look good. So we see all those compostable packaging that are everywhere, but what happens with the compostable packaging, it's not going to biodegrade in nature like everybody thinks. It needs to be put in a specific trash that will compost it because it has to be broken down with specific chemicals. So it is much faster than regular plastic, but it doesn't really work this way. So it is great to see that things are moving in the right direction. It is great to see since the beginning of the year so many countries that are moving in the direction of removing single-use plastic, of removing plastic bags. What Europe is doing is great. I think that really there's a lot of stuff that are happening. What I've noticed being a business owner in that space in the past 3 years is, and I was telling the panel, I started my restaurant the week Trump got elected, and I thought it was the biggest mistake of my life. But what I realized is that everybody individually realized that nobody was going to do something at a higher level, so we need to do something collectively to make a difference. And I think that we also realized that there's something that can be done, because initially climate change was so big, everybody thought, well, there's nothing I can do about it. And by start using disposable water bottles or disposable coffee cups on a daily basis, then you can really see the impact and you can see the difference. And I think that's very positive, because really individuals are starting to realize that they can do something and it matters. And as they do it, there's a huge snowball effect that they're impacting people around them, and that's really amazing.
And Chole made the great recommendation of ending the panel with a tip to make our lives more sustainable, so you can wait to hear from all the panelists about that. Robyn?
Yeah, it's really cool to hear the journeys of your industries. I guess every industry is going through that, and from kind of the electricity and energy sector, it's the same. 20 years ago, it was about how do you save a little money from energy efficiency, or be a first mover, kind of sustainability oriented company and put a solar panel on the roof. I'd say the last 10 years, it's been more of a financial focus. It's okay, let's save more money. This can be triple bottom line kind of approach, but it was still a very sustainability oriented conversation and first movers and a lot of marketing kind of value and but a lot of education, I would say, as well, because it's confusing. It's a really complicated topic and things are changing all the time. And then now, especially in the energy world, it's even more complicated, and there's some good things that are happening, like technology is commercialized and costs are plummeting. There is a lot more education from the multiple industries. There's a lot of regulatory, believe it or not, regulatory reform and evolution happening at the state and local levels. And also something that's really interesting is energy sectors that used to be a bit siloed, like there was the oil and gas world, and there was the electricity world, and then there was like the big utility world, and then there was the rooftop solar world. Like actually all of those worlds are now converging and they're intertwined. A decision OPEC makes might impact the scale of, a new solar company or like an electric car, growth moment. And that makes it more complicated, but it also means there's more opportunity. There's a lot more chaos. You can build some opportunity out of it, and you have different players interested in it. And now it's like, it's a lot more financially driven. And like you said at the beginning, let's go build businesses to scale or to combat climate change. And some people care about that. Some people just care about the money. And everyone's going towards that same end game. And so that to me is what's really different now. It's there's enough change and kind of convergence of worlds in the energy sector where it's attracting different attention. And so I think generally it's going to lead to really interesting things from a climate standpoint, because the value right now is in a lot of distributed clean energy and like new technology approaches and new business models. And so that knowing like 15 or 20 years ago, it was a very different conversation. It was like, hey, can you let me put, some new light bulbs in? It's like a very different, more exciting moment. I mean, that's really important for everyone to do that, but it's like, it's evolved from there.
And I think all of them have examples of how sustainability plays a role within their company's culture and how it affects the people that are attracted to your companies. So Chole, you had a really good example of the way that you engage your employees around sustainability, talking about plastic-free July. And can you share some specific things you do within your company around sustainability?
So I think what kind of drove us to do all those efforts is trying to run a zero waste restaurant or as close to possible to zero waste. I realized that, at the beginning you have to put ads on Craigslist and you just run them like whoever. Basically, when you own a restaurant, if you leave and you breathe and you're going to be on time, you're hired. Like you can start tomorrow if you want. That's how challenging the space is. So at the beginning, we just took anyone, and of course you try to have a fit, but little by little, we were lucky enough that people would walk in the restaurant, NYU students that were around the corner, saying that they were sensitive to the values we have. And as we grew and time passes by, it was very inspiring to see that people came for the values that we had and also challenged me in some stuff that I was doing. So a lot of the small steps that I took came from recommendation from intern or people that worked with me. One of the very first intern I had told me, like, why are you using Swiffer? It doesn't make any sense. You should have reusable cloth. And then, why are we using chemicals? We were not using chemicals, but why are we using those products that are not too toxic? We could just use white vinegar and do that. Same thing for the windows. So we started taking a lot of steps, inspiring ourselves on what the rest of the team was inviting me to do, which was great. But then moving from the restaurant where the whole focus of the restaurant was really zero waste and all of this, to a startup where now I have a co-founder and an engineer, and those two guys not necessarily, well, the engineer does, but my co-founder doesn't come with a sustainability background. He was very attracted with the mission that I was bringing in, but he was all new to that. So a few months ago, we decided to do Waste-Free Wednesdays. So all the team, every Wednesday, we're trying to be zero waste, and we challenge ourselves and we kind of check, okay, what did you do today? What's going on? At the beginning of the month, I challenged them to do plastic-free July, and day 2, my intern had a plastic bottle on the table, and I'm like, why is this? And so and that's something that I've been doing. That's something that I've been doing for the past 3 years at the restaurant. Is I look at every time they come in, I try to understand and challenge, or we're out of lemon. Do you mind going and get some? Why does it have to come in a plastic bag? So it's really educating them to not bring it in, why you should not bring it in, and then once you need to recycle the different things, how it should be done. So it's a lot of education, but trying to find a fun way, like the Zero Waste Wednesday is very fun, a fun way to interact with the team and educate them. I know that it's going to grow from just being one day a week to starting to be mindful of that, more days a week, and then them starting to inspire their friends, their coworkers, their roommates, and little by little, it's growing.
Robyn, another thing that you mentioned was just the ever-changing world that you're operating in, and that's not even taking into account the fact that you're at a early-stage company, which already in itself is unstable in a lot of ways. So how do you manage your team as they're reading all these headlines and getting excited about all the changes that are happening in your industry? How do you keep them focused on what's important and not distracted by some of the noise in the market?
It's a great question. Originally, we had a big vision and a plan, and the product we're building is, an integrated, sophisticated, it's all complicated, but the way we remained focused was identifying an initial, we call it mini city. It's like our initial proof point with real partners, and we'll show what we do. And it's like that first beta test, although we have to do it with like real customers and buildings and like be compliant with regulatory things and all the stuff. So it takes a little bit longer to get to that. But we've designed most of our life around delivering this kind of core initial proof point. And that has really helped us focus, and it's a really good canvas. It's still been quite complicated and there's surprises, but it's really helped us understand how to develop processes to absorb a lot of changes, sift it into things that, matter, like sift away the noise, get the things that matter, incorporate it in, readjust strategy around that. And that took some practice. I'd say the first few months was, I started our company around the Trump election too, by the way. Had the same feeling. I was like, what am I doing? The first few months was really overwhelming, I have to say. And then once we were able to really focus in, even though we've done a lot of other things besides that now, it's like this core mission, this core concrete outcome, and a lot of our sprint schedules, our master, everything is down to delivering on those goals. So it's been very organized in some ways, but it took work to get to that, and then figuring out how to absorb, sort, discard, real time with whether it's regulatory changes, industry changes, or just, surprises, because buildings they always have surprises with them, so.
And Lily, obviously there's a ton of differences between your role before of advising Fortune 500 companies on how to think about sustainability, both in-house as well as a consultant. And going from that to then working within your family business, there's lots of changes that we could talk about, but specifically around sustainability. How do you compare your experience of embedding a sustainability strategy within a Fortune 500 company versus coming to a family business and trying to figure out how that stack ranks against everything else that you guys are trying to do?
Yeah, I think, so it was interesting. I had a couple really nice, poignant conversations with my advisor, boss, when I was at PVH about kind of what I wanted my career to be. And we talked a lot about the fact that when you're at a huge company like PVH or any of the clients that I advised prior, you really have this opportunity to make a big impact, right? They have thousands of factories in their supply chain, hundreds of thousands or more customers, but ultimately, most of those companies were traditional linear business models. So they're taking something on the ground. So if it's apparel, you're, buying cotton or growing and then buying cotton, making a t-shirt, hoping that it sells, and then saying like, good luck, consumer, I'm going to sell you another one. And it's just kind of this assembly line of take, make, waste, and to really introduce circularity and get out of that traditional linear model. And when I say circularity, I mean, okay, once the t-shirt's done, who's responsible for it? We are, and we're taking it back, and we're going to do something different with it. To introduce a truly circular business model in a huge company that's Fortune 500 is really challenging because they have massive P&Ls, massive bureaucracy and infrastructure, kind of governing all the different channels of distribution for those businesses. And one of the big reasons why I decided to take this leap and rejoin Sorrelli was not because it was easier. Like for sure, my life was way less stressful when I wasn't running this business. Anyone who knows someone in a family business could probably attest. But I think the huge opportunity and the interesting part about sustainability strategy as it relates to a small business where you can be kind of at that executive level is that I have the ability to start to introduce a truly circular business model. We did a Visible Men workshop for Earth Day just a couple months ago and had our consumers bring their products in that they no longer use. So our business has a lifetime guarantee. We try to keep our products in use as much as possible, but it's fashion jewelry. At some point, somebody somewhere might say, I bought this 10 years ago, I don't want to wear these earrings anymore. And it was really, really cool to see them bring that in and watch us turn it into something new. So folks brought in like jeans and sweaters and stuff that needed mending, and we turned those pieces of jewelry, cut them up, turned them into embellishment on product. And customers were like, whoa, is this what circularity means? We're like, yeah, it means that thing isn't trash. It means it's going to something else. And there's many, many, many applications for that. So that's why it's exciting. That's a big difference.
And you were also talking about how the sustainability component of the business is also attracting certain types of people. Can you talk about why that sustainability value proposition you've been able to get, advisors, investors, folks that otherwise might not be interested in getting involved?
Yeah, so I'm lucky enough to have an independent advisory board, which is a saving grace, again, when you're in a private family business. So one of our advisors is an engagement manager at McKinsey, really super smart guy, came as a recommendation through a friend of a friend, has a master's in sustainability, not a fashion retail guy, but somebody who's able to apply a ton of knowledge from his experience at McKinsey to our small family business. And I think a huge reason why he joins us, kind of puts up with our craziness every quarter and helps advise us on calls and all of that, is because he believes in this mission. And I interview folks all the time for roles within Sorrelli, and I think candidates asking me about the values of the company comes up on almost every single call, which is really interesting. I mean, I've actually had young folks contact me and say, I didn't believe in the values of the firm, right? Whatever it was. And so I left my previous job and I'm really interested in this, which is huge. I mean, to be in your early to mid 20s and saying that on an interview it's just really exciting.
It's really interesting. And Robyn, you have an interesting investor base, having spun out of Lennar. You're attracting, folks from property tech development, from energy. Can you talk a little bit more about how you manage all of those different constituents and their opinions about how you should be leading your business?
Takes a lot of time. It's great. No, I love it. So I actually, when I did spin out of Lennar, and we got some great seed capital to get on our own 2 feet with my co-founders and get ready for the next kind of more traditional venture raise. And it was hard to raise money. We don't fit in one category, and it's a complicated topic. And also, clean tech has not had the best track record in the venture community. So there's a lot of different dynamics we had to deal with. And I was really excited when I realized I could create my ideal
pseudo venture fund. Like I could create a syndicate that represented the experience set and the investors that I wanted. I actually really love my diverse investor base. Since we touch on real estate, just general tech and like platform plays and energy, it's just really nice. I know who to go to when I need like a specific piece of advice. I actually like them balancing their opinions out with each other. Like it's a good devil's advocate. I sort of can expect what they're all going to say now. So sometimes I do that on purpose just so they hear it, because it's some aspect is new for them and they're like the incredible expert in one aspect. It's sort of like a systems play, I guess, from the investor standpoint. So it does take a lot of time, but I actually really love it because I learn a lot. I think they're all learning a lot from each other. And I have a feeling they're all like gonna go do more deals together. Like it just seems like it's kind of this old new network as they learn about, the growing world of energy and sustainability, or if that's what their skill set is, they're learning about like real estate and how real estate owners think. And I tend to love like converging worlds and intertwining. I've mentioned it a lot tonight. And
seeing it from my investor base has been really fun too.
Did you come up with that on your own, that idea of like creating your own ideal venture fund, or did someone advise you to do that, like as you're going through the fundraising process?
Yeah, I think it was like someone just, like I didn't know it was allowed, frankly. Like I never really raised my own venture before, so I didn't know I thought there was like certain ways you had to do it, frankly. And then I think someone just was like, you don't have to do it a certain way. And when it just opened my mind a little bit. And then I think that's when I'm like, wait a minute, maybe we can just have these guys talk to each other. And then that worked. And I think it's like a really interesting, for anyone thinking about, starting their own business and connecting a few worlds together. These are all layers, sustainability layers over everything. And, it's an option. So I had no idea I could do it. And then, I think it was like someone like offhandedly mentioned, like, why don't you just go ask if, I don't know. It was just like, oh, yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Go try it.
Yeah, I don't think founders realize that, like, well, one, they have leverage in those conversations and everything's negotiable.
Yeah.
But two, everyone on your team who's on your bench like wants you to succeed. So if you can make the argument that like that other investor is going to make your company more valuable, then why would an investor say no to that?
Yeah.
Like they would rather you be successful than be handicapped by not having that perspective represented on your board.
Absolutely. Yeah, that was a good wake-up call for me too. I mean, coming from big industry, I'd been in large companies before. I mean, innovation is not everyone's rooting for you to succeed if you're an innovator, right, inside a large company. And that's often the ability to like start your own thing or be in kind of a more entrepreneurial world. It changes. Everyone is rooting for you to succeed in some way or another. So, yeah, interesting.
And Chloe, you alluded to this at the beginning. By being from France, you're by nature an environmentalist, and you didn't realize it. So you kind of get a peek into the future when you see what's happening in Europe, and it sounds like you're keeping a pulse on that. But to what extent does that inform how you're building your business?
Good question. I think that, it's very interesting because obviously food, especially in France, is a big deal. We spend all of our time thinking about food if we're not eating. That's why I wanted to have a restaurant, because I felt like as a kid, all my memories were either eating, and then when you're eating, you're planning, okay, what are we doing for the next meal? And then you're just buying food and making food and eating. Like that's all we do. So food is a pretty big deal. And what's very interesting is in Paris, the whole, which is something that we're seeing here in the city as well, but the whole delivery system is kind of not working as well as it should, and people are starting little by little to transition to having smart refrigerator or vending machine or different ways to buy food in a fast and efficient manner. So I did not move from the restaurant to the vending machine being inspired by what was happening in France, but now that I'm looking at it and talking to a lot of French people, I know definitely the food, the venture capital world around food, everybody's moving towards automatization and robots and machine, and that's exactly what we're doing. So that's very interesting that in parallel, I just moved in the direction of what's happening in France. So I think that's shaping the way I do, but also from a food standpoint, I obviously, having lived in New York for 14 years, I'm very aware of what New Yorker wants to eat, and having worked in a corporate office for 10 years, I know what I was craving, what I was not craving, but I always go back to my roots and trying to make things as simple as possible. And some of the recipes, when we initially opened and I talked to my sister and I gave her the menu and she's like, I can do that at home in 5 minutes. And I was like, well, remember, we're in New York, nobody cooks at home, so nobody's making anything in 5 minutes, and we're just looking for clean and healthy food. So that's something that I always have in the back of my mind. And when I have chefs in my kitchen that are coming with new ideas and new recipe, I try to challenge them to make it simpler and really take good quality ingredient and put it at the center of what we're doing, instead of putting too many things that are going to blend in and nothing is going to have any flavor, just making sure that we take good quality things and put it in the center. So I think that that's always in the back of my mind.
As Danielle mentioned, we're going to open it up to the audience for questions, so consider this your warning. And I'll have one more question before opening it up to the audience. So all of you have very deep missions kind of embedded within your organizations. Obviously, sometimes there's trade-offs that you have to make, and you can't always achieve your mission at the same time as your kind of business KPIs. And so can you talk about a time where you had to make a decision and navigate choosing between those two things, your kind of core business and your sustainability objectives, and how you navigated that? So Lily, we'll start with you. I know you've seen it many times over in your company as well as in the companies you worked for before.
Yeah, so given my role at Sorrelli kind of for the second time is a little bit early days, I'll talk about some trade-offs that I've seen kind of as a consultant and in-house at bigger companies. So I think a lot of times when it comes to the sustainability community, I think folks talk about sustainability as if like the sustainability mission is the thing and the actual business is meant to serve it. And in some cases that works really, really well. Like I'm in awe of what Patagonia has built because they've really built this business where sustainability is the mission and the business supports that. But to me, having worked in at least the fashion and retail industry, that is definitely not the norm. That's kind of the exception. And so what I've seen working in the industry is that if you're coming from a sustainability point of view and you have this mission to whatever it is, let's say embed better cotton initiative BCI into a product line or whatever the case may be, make the energy procurement more sustainable and renewable. Like you have to go into all of those conversations with business executives with the business case in mind. And I watched some of my colleagues at PVH and also on the client side just take no after no after no in those meetings until the actual economics, the unit economics of what they were requesting made sense to the business. And so I think it's maybe not the kind of fairy tale of what you're asking, but there is usually a way for those sustainability goals to be had, but it takes a lot of creativity and a lot of partnership with the business. And you have to respect that you're in a business and the bottom line does matter in addition to all of those sustainability kind of triple bottom line efforts that we're all pushing for.
Do you feel like what Robyn was saying before was what's true in like the energy space, that it's been getting easier to make that business case over time?
I mean, it was interesting. I think yes, it definitely gets easier as things like BCI scale over the years and become less expensive than they were when they started. But if you're an executive making that actual business decision of whether to invest in that organic material, the first question you're going to ask is, what's the cost? Is it 2x of the traditional? If the answer is yes, then you got to be real creative about how you work that material in. And it's totally unrealistic to try to knock on that executive's door and say, but 100% of our product needs to be this. Like that doesn't work, right? So I do think as companies make 5% commitments and 10% commitments, the scale grows in general and then the price goes down and it's like a win-win for everybody.
Yep. Actually, one more question. Do you see suppliers prioritizing it? So
in my experience in fashion, suppliers want the money from the brands that are buying from them, right? So if you as the brand aren't asking for compliance here, you're asking for compliance here, no, those suppliers aren't going to rise to here. I mean, it's very, very rare that a supplier on their own is reaching, and that they exist, right? There's some amazing facilities that are above and beyond in terms of their human rights and environmental ethics. But typically when brands and retailers demand excellence and incentivize that excellence, suppliers rise to the occasion because it's a business and they want to make sure that they secure that volume that they had in the past.
Yep. Chloe, what about you?
Yeah, I would answer at two levels. One was kind of the interesting discovery when I started the restaurant and I was really pushing, saying it's great, it's in glass, it's great for the environment, and people didn't really care. And I realized that, as you were saying, you need to make sure that the value proposition makes sense. So why would people come? Because the food was good, it was local, it was healthy. That's what they were looking for. So I started switching the way I was approaching and advertising the products when they would walk in the store, and I would really highlight what they were looking for. I would be like, okay, it's great, it's healthy, it's clean, locally sourced, great. And then, oh, by the way, if you come back and you bring your jar, you're going to save money. So that's good for you. And you're going to do something good for the environment. And so when they got into, oh, we like the food, it's really good, we're going to come back. Well, no matter what, we're going to come back. Might as well bring the jar and save money. Oh, and I'm doing something good. So they started feeling really good about it. But it's really a matter of pushing sustainability when it makes sense and making sure you're addressing the people the right way. So that's something that I learned that I felt was really interesting. And we do the same thing with the machine, where we really push on the quality of the ingredients and the way everything is homemade every day, rather than just pushing on sustainability. But when they get attracted to it, that really works. And from a business standpoint, as you're saying, numbers are numbers. So, you know, having run my restaurant on my own for 3 years, I was making all the decisions that I wanted to make, even if it was costing money, because I felt that in the long run, people would understand that these are my values and this is important. Now switching to a business where I have investors and I have a co-founder, you know, at some point you're like, okay, I'm going to give up on this one, or fine, we're going to do one of my latest. Our jars are pretty narrow and tall because we had to change the size from the one I was using at the restaurant. And it's not always easy to dig all the way in with the fork. So some people don't want to do that. So one of the solutions is to have those little cardboard boats where you can put the salad in and eat in it. So that's a huge fight I had with my co-founder. I'm like, this is totally useless. We're trying to be zero waste. Why are we putting those boats on the side? It doesn't make any sense. And after a little bit, when you see, you know, our goal is to make sure that the customers are happy. When you see one or two people that are kind of struggling and they're not going to come back because of that, you're like, okay, you know what? We're going to give them the boats. In the long term, my goal is to redesign a jar that will have the perfect shape so we don't need to use them, but we can still make a big difference with what we're doing today and still have those boats. So it's trying to find a compromise and keeping in mind, which I think is what you say, what your long-term goal is, and be like, okay, in the long run, this is the direction I'm going to go in, and I know we're going to focus on that. I might need to make a compromise, but I'm fine with it.
So what I heard is consumers are looking for something and sustainability, comfortable and sustainable, healthy and sustainable, fast and sustainable. It's not just, you can't sacrifice the core value proposition of the product and hope that consumers will buy it just because it's sustainable if like the other qualities aren't there.
I would say the global market, yes, there's definitely a group of people that will come for sustainability. I have to say that I'm impressed today, what you were saying, I'm impressed today by how people align with values, how social media can move people. I was on a show this Sunday on a Brazilian TV around sustainability, and I didn't realize it was airing, and in an hour, we got 200 followers on our Instagram feed, and I was like, what the hell is going on? And then I looked at my email, and I had 20 emails of people that were asking me, we want to put a vending machine in Sao Paulo, we want to put a vending machine there in Brazil, and they're like, we love our values, we love your mission. And I was impressed, like, back in the days, things like this would never happen, but now everybody is looking, they're speaking their values, they're speaking what they're doing, or if it's not available where they are, when they're going to travel and come to New York. So many times I had people that came to my restaurant and were like, oh my God, I've been following you for the past 2 years. I'm so excited. What you're doing has inspired me to do a lot. So I feel that there's a group of people, hardcore, sustainable, that will come no matter what. But the general public will come because the food is good. And then it's going to be a good value add. But you need to make sure, it's like any restaurant. If the food is bad, you're not going to go back. So you need to make sure that the food is good. And then if it has a lot of other things, then that's great. But there's things that you can compromise on.
And Robyn, what about you? I think we talked about kind of a trade-off that you had to make and what you would and wouldn't support.
Yeah. So how our initial go-to-market strategy is to find buildings with existing on-site energy assets, whether it's solar or natural gas generation, these combined heat and power units, which are pretty efficient. And then a lot of buildings have diesel generators. And so as a small young company, you need to get real customers and you need to get to revenue. And we had to decide if we would, what we do is we connect to those and we start managing them to sell excess energy into the grid and elsewhere. And there's a lot of existing capacity of diesel generation, which are often being underutilized, and it would have been like really quick win revenue and partnerships for us, and that we actually decided to not focus on and to not include as part of our, I mean, technically we can do it, but we just decided to not do it. And so that, I think that was a decision my co-founders and I made together, and we knew it was a risk. But it's, you know, and I think it wasn't a hard discussion with our investors, because it like aligns with our mission, even though it's revenue sitting on the table for us. So that was a decision we made. We're generally like pretty open-minded and flexible, and usually like aware of some of the sacrifices we should be taking. But this is an example of in terms of, you know, working not in like our pure mission and like being accommodating for a lot of things, but this was one clear example of we couldn't do it. So that, you know, maybe I'll regret that in 2 years, but yeah, we don't connect to diesel generators.
Who are your CEO role models?
Well, bouncing back on what you just said, the company that does recycle those coffee things is called TerraCycle.
Oh.
And Tom Sasky, the CEO, is a pretty amazing guy. And so on the sustainability level, he's a huge inspiration and he's a visionary. He really started his company and pivoted, like now it's the 4th time. So after TerraCycle and taking all the big things that were, or talking to all big corporations like Colgate and whatever, and saying, oh, well, you have those tubes of toothpaste and we don't know what to do with it, send them back to us. And instead of talking to the sustainability department, which was so small and didn't have budget, he went to talk to the marketing department and say, hey, let's do something good for your clients. The company is going to look good. We're going to have a return program on your website, and they can send it back and we'll recycle it for you. So that's how we started. And then he was so big and so impactful that he decided to launch Loop, that just started recently. And he is working with all the same big corporations that he's been working for the past 5 to 10 years, and having reusable packaging. So now you can order online your agendas in reusable double wall stainless steel thing that looks beautiful. You can buy reusable shampoo, you have toothbrush, like they have everything. So they partner with all the big brands, and you can order online, get everything in this tote bag, and you use it, and once you're done, you send it back, and they give you a refund on all the packaging that you use. So I think that that's really good. And talking about example of starting, he initially started with a fertilizer to do compost, and then he realized that this was not working, and he grew and moved the business. So I think that's a huge inspiration for me.
I have learned a lot from a lot of amazing CEOs that I've worked for, been around, and everyone has sort of brought a different piece to the table. So I actually don't think I've met a perfect CEO that I love, but I admire so many of them and have learned a lot, and often different things. So, which is, I think, why, I mean, I'm not starting my company in my early 20s, so I've had, you know, a pretty long career to get here, and I'm actually really appreciative for it. I feel really prepared. You know, just learning about different ways and, you know, how you build a company, and learning from the strengths of so many different approaches to leadership, some good, some bad, and just learning what matters for you when you start your own thing, or when you rise to that position of leadership. So I like my collection of people I've learned from, and can't wait to learn from more. So
it's like your investor base.
It's like my investors, yeah.
You learn a little bit from a bunch of different people.
I have to say, bouncing back from that, it's true that when you're an entrepreneur, especially when you're a woman, there's a lot of people, especially when you switch career to go to something that you were dreaming, there's clearly a lot of people that inspired you. Maybe not, like I have a lot of not famous CEO that really inspired me, because it was women that used to work in finance and then stopped everything to open their own bakery or their own restaurant, or doing stuff on zero waste. And clearly you put all the pieces together and you're like, okay, I like this, I like this, I like this, and I'm going to try to represent all of that.
Totally. I think it's like you realize your community is so much more important, especially women's networks and community. I tend to, be in mostly male, industries, and I'm not used to being in a room full of women, which is like, I get so excited, except, I mean, now my own company is a room full of women, but it's like, I still find it like really incredible, and I realize the power of that. A diverse network, of course, but the community aspect, I think, you're right, it really rises up to being important, I think.
Thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of the evening.